There is something many people never understand about human nature. They think people learn through words. They think people change because someone explains the truth to them. They think appreciation comes from being told what they should appreciate. But life doesn't work that way. Human beings often learn through absence. They learn through consequences. They learn through realizing what they had only after it's no longer available. And when a woman does not value a man, when she overlooks his effort, ignores his loyalty, takes his presence for granted, and assumes he will always be there no matter how she treats him, there is one thing that hurts her more than almost anything else. It is not his anger. It is not his arguments. It is not his begging. It is not his jealousy. It is his complete emotional detachment. Because as long as a man is angry, he still cares. As long as he argues, he is still emotionally invested. As long as he chases, explains, and tries to convince her, she still feels his attention. But the moment he becomes indifferent, the moment he stops trying to prove his worth, something changes. And that change becomes impossible to ignore. Many men make the mistake of believing they can force someone to value them. They think if they explain themselves better, love harder, give more, sacrifice more, tolerate more disrespect, eventually the other person will wake up and appreciate them. But value doesn't come from what you give. Value comes from what people believe they can lose. The sun is valuable because if it disappeared, everything would change. Water is valuable because life cannot survive without it. And people often fail to appreciate things that seem permanent. The moment something feels guaranteed, gratitude begins to disappear. That is why some women stop valuing a good man, not because he lacks worth, not because he lacks character, but because she starts believing he will never leave. She starts believing she can ignore him, disrespect him, prioritize everyone else, and he will still remain exactly where she left him. And once that belief settles in, appreciation slowly fades. She becomes comfortable. Too comfortable. The messages become shorter. The effort becomes weaker. The respect becomes inconsistent. The gratitude disappears. And all the while, the man keeps giving. He keeps showing up. He keeps forgiving. He keeps understanding. He keeps making excuses for behavior that should never have been accepted. Until eventually something inside him changes, not overnight, not dramatically, not with an announcement, just quietly, very quietly, because every human being has a limit. Even the strongest heart grows tired of carrying a relationship alone. Even the most patient soul gets exhausted from being taken for granted. Even the most loyal person reaches a point where staying hurts more than leaving. And when that point arrives, the energy changes. The man who once called first no longer calls. The man who always checked in becomes silent. The man who used to fight for every conversation suddenly stops fighting. And that's when confusion begins, because many people don't notice value while they have it. They notice it when it disappears. The attention she once ignored becomes the attention she starts searching for. The messages she once delayed become the messages she wishes would arrive. The man she once considered ordinary suddenly becomes extraordinary, not because he changed. Because distance revealed what familiarity had hidden. Human psychology is strange. People can spend years overlooking something beautiful simply because it became normal. Then the moment it's gone, they realize how rare it actually was. And nothing hurts more than realizing you lost something you never truly appreciated. Think about it. A man who constantly seeks approval communicates one thing. He communicates that he needs validation. But a man who can walk away from disrespect communicates something entirely different. He communicates self-respect. And self-respect is powerful because it cannot be manipulated. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be negotiated. When a woman sees that a man is willing to lose her rather than lose himself, she suddenly sees him differently, not because he became cruel, not because he became cold, but because he stopped abandoning his own standards. There is something deeply unsettling about watching someone move on without resentment, without revenge, without drama, without trying to make you jealous, just peacefully moving forward. That kind of silence forces reflection. Because now there is no argument to focus on, no conflict to blame, no emotional chaos to distract from reality. Only the truth remains. And the truth is often painful. The truth says, I had someone who cared deeply about me, and I failed to recognize it. That realization cuts deeper than anger ever could, because anger creates resistance, but regret creates reflection. And reflection is where pain grows. The mind begins replaying memories, conversations return, moments return. The little things that once seemed insignificant suddenly become important. The good morning messages, the support during difficult days, the loyalty during uncertain times, the presence that was always there. Suddenly everything becomes visible. But now visibility arrives too late, and timing matters. One of the harshest lessons in life is that appreciation delayed can become appreciation wasted. There are opportunities that do not return. There are people who do not come back. There are chapters that close forever. And when someone realizes they allowed a valuable person to walk away because they assumed that person would always stay, the emotional weight becomes enormous. Not because they lost attention, because they lost certainty. People underestimate how comforting genuine loyalty is. In a world filled with temporary connections, loyalty is rare. In a world filled with options, commitment is rare. In a world where people leave at the first inconvenience, consistency is rare. And rare things should never be treated casually, yet many people do exactly that. They overlook loyalty because loyalty doesn't demand attention. It simply exists. Quickly, steadily, without advertisement, without performance, without constant reminders. And because it becomes familiar, it becomes invisible. Until it's gone, then suddenly the absence becomes louder than the presence ever was. The empty space speaks, the missing calls speak, the missing support speaks, the missing affection speaks. And every reminder whispers the same painful truth. You had something valuable. You just didn't value it. The strongest men understand something important. Their purpose is not to convince people of their worth. Their purpose is to recognize their own worth. There is a huge difference. When you spend your life trying to make others appreciate you, you become dependent on their approval. But when you know your value, you stop negotiating for basic respect. You stop chasing people who are comfortable losing you. You stop begging for attention. You stop forcing connections. And ironically, that is when people begin seeing your value most clearly, because confidence creates clarity, desperation creates blindness. The man who knows his worth understands that love should be mutual, respect should be mutual, effort should be mutual. And if they are not, walking away is not punishment. It is protection. Protection of his peace. Protection of his dignity. Protection of his future. Too many people remain in situations where they are tolerated instead of appreciated. They accept crumbs because they fear loneliness. They stay available because they fear rejection. They lower standards because they fear loss. But every time you accept less than you deserve, you teach others how to treat you. And eventually that lesson becomes your reality. Every time you allow disrespect to pass without consequence, you send a message. Not with your words, but with your actions. And actions are always louder. People may ignore what you say, but they pay attention to what you tolerate. That is why a man who truly understands his worth does not spend his life demanding respect. He lives in a way that requires it. He understands that respect cannot be begged for. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be forced. It can only be earned and maintained through standards. And standards become visible the moment you are willing to walk away from what no longer serves your peace. Many women never expect that moment to come. They become accustomed to the man's presence, accustomed to his consistency, accustomed to his availability, accustomed to the fact that no matter what happens, he always returns. He always reaches out. He always forgives. He always gives another chance. And because he always returns, they stop imagining a reality where he is gone. But life has a strange way of teaching lessons through absence. One day the phone does not ring. One day the message never arrives. One day the attention they assumed was permanent quietly disappears. And suddenly the certainty they relied upon begins to crumble. The human mind has a tendency to ignore blessings that arrive too easily. That is why people often miss what they once overlooked. Not because the thing became more valuable, because they finally gained the perspective to see its value. The same man they once took for granted suddenly becomes the standard by which everyone else is measured. And that comparison is often painful because they discover that genuine loyalty is not everywhere. A man who listens is not everywhere. A man who stays during difficult moments is not everywhere. A man who genuinely wants the best for someone is not everywhere. Those qualities are becoming increasingly rare, and rare things are difficult to replace. Many people believe they have endless options until life forces them to to test those options. They believe they can lose one good person and easily find another. Then reality arrives. Reality shows them that chemistry is common, attention is common, attraction is common, but genuine commitment is uncommon. Emotional maturity is uncommon. Consistency is uncommon. A person who sincerely chooses you every day is uncommon. And once they lose someone like that, they begin noticing the difference everywhere. The conversations feel different. The connections feel different. The energy feels different because what they lost was not simply a person. They lost a feeling of certainty, a feeling of trust, a feeling of emotional safety. And feelings like that cannot be replaced overnight. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that kind people are weak. Kindness and weakness are not the same thing. Patience and weakness are not the same thing. Understanding and weakness are not the same thing. In fact, truly kind people often possess extraordinary strength because they choose compassion when bitterness would be easier. They choose understanding when anger would be justified. They choose patience when frustration would be natural, but eventually even the strongest patience reaches its limit. And when that limit arrives, the shift is dramatic, not because the man becomes angry, not because he becomes cruel, but because he becomes unavailable, emotionally unavailable, mentally unavailable, energetically unavailable. And there is something incredibly painful about realizing someone no longer needs your validation because now control disappears. Now certainty disappears. Now the dynamic changes. The person who once focused so much attention on you is suddenly focused on his own growth, his own goals, his own purpose, his own future. And people often become fascinated by what they can no longer influence. That fascination creates curiosity. The curiosity creates reflection, and reflection often creates regret. Regret is one of the heaviest emotions a person can carry because regret cannot change the past. It can only replay it over and over again. The mind starts asking questions. What if I had appreciated him more? What if I had listened more carefully? What if I had respected his effort? What if I had recognized his value before he left? But questions cannot reverse time. Questions cannot restore opportunities. Questions cannot reopen every closed door. And that reality creates a unique kind of pain. The pain of knowing the outcome could have been different. Many men spend years trying to become enough for someone, training to prove themselves, trying to earn love, trying to earn appreciation, trying to earn attention. But the strongest transformation happens when a man realizes he was enough all along. The problem was never his value. The problem was where he was investing it. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your loyalty. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. And understanding that truth changes everything, because once a man understands his worth, he stops overextending himself for people who barely notice his effort. He stops sacrificing his peace for temporary validation. He stops shrinking himself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Instead, he begins building a life that reflects his standards. And something interesting happens. The more he focuses on himself, the more attractive he becomes, not because he is seeking attention, because he is no longer dependent on it. There is tremendous power in a person who is content with their own company, a person who enjoys their own path, a person who does not need constant reassurance. That kind of confidence cannot be faked, and people notice it, especially those who once underestimated it. The woman who failed to value him often expects him to remain emotionally available forever. She assumes there will always be another chance, another conversation, another opportunity, another moment to reconnect. But life offers no such guarantees. Sometimes people leave quietly and never return. Sometimes they move forward so completely that the past becomes nothing more than a memory. And when that happens, the realization becomes impossible to escape. The opportunity is gone. The person is gone. The version of the relationship that once existed is gone. Many people confuse access with ownership. Just because someone is present does not mean they belong to you. Just because someone loves you does not mean they will stay forever. Love is a gift, not a contract. Respect is a responsibility, not an entitlement. And when respect disappears, love often follows, because healthy love cannot survive where appreciation is absent. Every meaningful relationship requires nourishment, attention, effort, gratitude, respect. Without those things, even the strongest connection begins to weaken slowly, quickly, almost invisibly, until one day the distance becomes undeniable. By then, the damage is often already done. That is why emotional neglect is so dangerous. dangerous. It rarely destroys relationships overnight. It destroys them gradually through repeated moments of indifference, through repeated moments of taking someone for granted, through repeated moments of assuming they will always understand, always forgive, always stay. Eventually, the emotional account becomes empty. Too many withdrawals, not enough deposits. And once that account reaches zero, recovery becomes difficult. Because trust takes time to build, respect takes time to build, detachment takes time to build. But losing them can happen much faster. The reality many people refuse to accept is that every relationship has an expiration date if appreciation disappears. No amount of history can replace respect. No amount of memories can replace effort. No amount of potential can replace consistency. What matters is what happens daily, the small actions, the small choices, the small moments. Those moments create the foundation of every connection. And when those moments are neglected, cracks begin to form. At first, they seem insignificant, but eventually the entire structure feels unstable. Then comes the moment many people never expect. The man stops trying, not because he stopped caring overnight, because caring alone was no longer enough, because he finally understood that love should not require him to abandon himself. He finally understood that loyalty should not require endless sacrifice without appreciation. He finally understood that protecting his peace was not selfish. It was necessary. And once that understanding becomes clear, there is no going back to the old version of him, the version that accepted crumbs, the version that tolerated disrespect, the version that constantly overgave. That version disappears. In its place stands someone stronger, someone wiser, someone more selective with his energy, someone who understands that his presence is valuable. The interesting thing is that people often recognize your value most clearly when they no longer have unlimited access to it, when your attention becomes scarce, when your energy becomes focused elsewhere, when your life continues without them. That is when reality becomes impossible to ignore, because now they must watch from a distance, watch the growth, watch the progress, watch the happiness, watch the peace. And every sign of that growth becomes a reminder of what they failed to appreciate. Not everyone will admit it. Not everyone will say it out loud. But deep down they know. They know when they overlook someone good. They know when they failed to appreciate genuine effort. They know when they allowed ego, pride, comfort, or complacency to destroy something meaningful. And those realizations often arrive during the quietest moments, late at night, during lonely afternoons, during moments of reflection when distractions disappear and honesty becomes unavoidable. Because truth has a way of finding people eventually. You can postpone it, nice it, run from it, distract yourself from it. But eventually it arrives. And when it arrives, it asks one simple question. Did you appreciate what you had while you had it? For many people, that question becomes difficult to answer because hindsight creates clarity. Suddenly, they remember the patience, the support, the encouragement, the consistency, the understanding, all the things they so once viewed as ordinary. Only now do they understand how extraordinary those things actually were. Only now do they understand how rare it is to find someone willing to invest so deeply in another person. Only now do they understand that genuine love is not measured by grand gestures alone. It is measured by presence, by consistency, by loyalty during ordinary days, by choosing someone repeatedly when easier options exist. And when those realizations arrive after the person is gone, the weight becomes even heavier. Because awareness without opportunity creates one of the most painful experiences a human being can feel. The awareness that something precious was in your hands and you failed to recognize its value until it slipped away. And perhaps the hardest part is not losing the person itself. The hardest part is realizing that the warning signs were there all along. The conversations became shorter. The effort became one-sided. The enthusiasm slowly faded. The man who once shared everything became quieter. The man who once rushed to be there started taking his time. The man who once fought for every misunderstanding began choosing silence instead. But because change happens gradually, many people fail to notice it. They assume everything is fine. They assume tomorrow will look exactly like today. They assume there will always be another chance to fix things later. Yet later is a dangerous word. Later has ended countless relationships. Later has destroyed countless opportunities. Later has left countless people carrying regret they can never fully escape. Because while someone is postponing appreciation, the other person may be reaching their limit. While someone is taking loyalty for granted, the loyal person may be growing tired. While someone is assuming they have unlimited chances, the other person may already be preparing to move forward. And once a person reaches emotional peace without you, they become very difficult to pull back into old patterns. Why? Because peace is powerful. A man who has finally healed no longer feels the urge to chase. A man who has rebuilt his confidence no longer seeks validation from people who failed to appreciate him. A man who has discovered his purpose no longer revolves his entire life around someone's attention. His energy changes, his priorities change, his standards change, and the people who once overlooked him begin to notice that transformation. Not because he is trying to impress them, because growth is impossible to hide. There is something magnetic about a person who knows who they are, a person who walks with quiet confidence, a person who no longer needs to prove their value, a person who understands that their worth is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. That realization alone changes everything, because the strongest position in life is not making people choose you. The strongest position is choosing yourself when others fail to value you, choosing your peace, choosing your dignity, choosing your growth, choosing your future. Many people spend years waiting for others to appreciate them, years waiting for validation, years waiting for recognition. But true freedom begins the moment you stop waiting, the moment you stop asking people to see your value and start living as if you already know it. That confidence creates a completely different energy, an energy that says, I am grateful for those who appreciate me, but I will not beg those who don't. And that mindset changes relationships forever, because now every connection becomes a choice rather than a necessity. Every interaction becomes a bonus rather than a requirement. Every relationship becomes something that adds to your life rather than defines it. Ironically, that is often when people begin realizing what they lost, when they see the man they underestimated thriving without resentment, without bitterness, without trying to prove a point, simply moving forward, simply becoming better, simply building a life that no longer depends on their approval. And in that moment, a painful truth often settles into their mind. They realize that the attention they once ignored was genuine. The loyalty they once overlooked was rare. The patience they once took for granted was valuable. And the man they thought would always be there eventually learned how to be happy without them. For many people, that realization lingers far longer than any argument, any breakup, or any moment of conflict ever could, because some wounds heal with time, but the memory of losing someone who truly cared because you failed to value them has a way of echoing through the years, returning in quiet moments as a reminder that appreciation is most powerful when it is given in the present, not discovered in the past.